Tesla spent years convincing the auto industry that the electric future would be won by whoever could move fastest, cut costs hardest, and rethink the car from the ground up. Ford watched that revolution happen, spent billions trying to respond, and now it may have found a trap Tesla did not expect. Instead of trying to beat every Chinese electric car company head-on, Ford is opening one of its own European factories to Geely, one of China's most powerful automotive groups, and using that partnership to attack the exact weaknesses that have made electric vehicles so expensive for legacy automakers. The symbolism is difficult to miss. Ford is the company that put America on wheels. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile, but the moving assembly line transformed it from a luxury product into mass transportation. The Model T became a symbol of industrial scale. The $5 workday became part of the mythology of the American middle class. The F-150 has dominated the American vehicle market for decades. Ford survived depressions, wars, oil shocks, foreign competition, and the financial crisis. In 2008, when other Detroit giants entered bankruptcy and accepted government rescue money, Ford famously mortgaged virtually everything, including the blue oval trademark, and fought its way through without a bailout. Independence was not merely a business strategy. It became part of the company's identity. That is why what Ford is doing now matters. A company built around doing things its own way has decided that one of the smartest moves it can make in the electric era is to share a factory with a Chinese automaker, share technology, share development costs, and allow Chinese-branded electric SUVs to roll off a Ford production line. At first glance, that sounds like Ford surrendering ground. Look closer, and it could be something much more complicated. Ford may be using China's greatest automotive strengths to rebuild its own electric business, while Tesla is forced to fight an increasingly brutal price war from both directions. To understand the trap, you first have to understand why Ford became willing to make a move this radical. The electric transition attacked the heart of what traditional automakers were good at. For most of the 20th century, automotive expertise meant engines, transmissions, mechanical engineering, manufacturing scale, dealer networks, and decades of accumulated knowledge about internal combustion. Ford had all of that. But electric vehicles shifted value toward batteries, electronics, software, power management, supply chains, and development speed. Suddenly, a century of experience with pistons and combustion was not enough. China had spent roughly 2 decades building an ecosystem around the new parts of the car. Government support helped create battery companies, secure raw materials, expand charging infrastructure, and nurture dozens of electric vehicle manufacturers. The result was not merely cheaper cars. Chinese automakers began moving at a different speed. Companies such as BYD and Geely could bring vehicles from development to market in roughly 12 to 18 months, in cases where traditional Western programs could take several years. That difference compounds. If one company takes 5 years to complete a vehicle program, while another can develop, release, study customer feedback, and refresh multiple products during the same period, the slower company is not simply behind by one model. It is operating on a different clock. Tesla understood that early. Its advantage was never just that it sold electric cars. Tesla behaved more like a technology company than a century-old automaker. It simplified manufacturing, pushed software updates remotely, vertically integrated important systems, reduced the number of components, and repeatedly forced competitors to rethink how quickly they could make decisions. Ford tried to catch up, but the financial cost has been enormous. Its electric division, Model E, lost more than $5 billion in 2024, close to another $5 billion in 2025, and Ford has warned investors to expect billions more in losses during 2026. Across roughly 3 years, the electric operation has burned through something approaching $15 billion. Ford has also said that it does not expect the division to become profitable until around 2029. Those losses would be painful under any circumstances, but they became much harder to justify when customer demand developed differently from the forecasts that helped justify the spending. Ford found itself selling roughly twice as many hybrids as fully electric vehicles. The gasoline Mustang continued outselling the electric Mustang Mach-E by a wide margin. A huge 3-row electric SUV program was canceled after Ford concluded the economics were not going to work, producing a write-off of roughly $1.9 billion. Then came an even larger reset. Ford announced around $19.5 billion in special charges connected to restructuring its electric strategy, including canceled programs, impaired assets, and other costs. Those charges contributed to an annual net loss of more than $8 billion in 2025, one of Ford's worst full-year results since the global financial crisis. This time, there was no banking collapse or worldwide recession to point toward. Ford had simply built an electric strategy around assumptions that proved too expensive and too optimistic. The company reacted by creating a lower-cost electric vehicle skunk works operation in California, bringing in talent with backgrounds at companies including Tesla and Formula One, and giving the team a mission to design a fundamentally cheaper electric platform. That program may become important, but its first products are not expected until 2027 at the earliest. Ford needed relief before then. Tariffs were also adding billions in costs. European operations remained under pressure. And one of the most visible examples of Ford's problem was sitting in Valencia, Spain. The Valencia factory was designed to produce roughly 500,000 vehicles annually, yet it was running at only about 26% of capacity. Imagine a giant industrial complex with tooling, workers, maintenance, utilities, logistics contracts, and fixed costs, but with almost 3/4 of its productive capability sitting unused. An empty production line does not stop costing money simply because nothing is coming off the end of it. Ford needed volume. Geely needed a European manufacturing base. That is where the deal becomes more than a rescue plan for an underused factory. On July 23, 2026, Ford and Geely announced a joint venture centered on Valencia. Ford retains control with a 66% stake. Geely takes 34% and is expected to contribute roughly €220 million. The plan is to transform the plant into a much busier operation producing 5 new vehicles beginning in 2028. Ford is expected to build a new member of the Bronco family for Europe, along with an electric crossover that Ford designs while developing key elements with Geely. Geely, meanwhile, plans to produce 2 electric SUVs under Chinese brands inside the same Ford facility. Ford's Kuga, already an important plug-in hybrid in Europe, is expected to continue production while the new programs are prepared. The joint venture itself is expected to begin operating during the first half of 2027. For Ford, the logic is powerful. Instead of carrying the full cost of an underutilized factory, it adds volume. Instead of funding every electric platform alone, it shares development expenses. Instead of waiting years to recreate technology that Chinese automakers already possess, it gains access to a partner that has spent years building exactly the systems Ford needs. Instead of closing a factory and absorbing the political and financial consequences, it gives the plant a future. That alone would make the deal interesting, but the history between these companies makes it extraordinary. Ford once owned Volvo. During the aftermath of the financial crisis, Ford needed cash and sold the Swedish brand to Geely in 2010. At the time, Geely was far less familiar to Western consumers, and plenty of observers questioned whether a Chinese owner could preserve Volvo's engineering reputation. What happened instead became one of the more important automotive transformations of the last generation. Geely invested heavily, allowed Volvo substantial operational independence, expanded technology development, and helped turn the company into a much stronger global player. Geely itself expanded into an enormous automotive empire. It controls Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and the company behind London's modern electric taxis. It owns a major stake in Mercedes-Benz and operates a wide portfolio of domestic Chinese brands and technology businesses. Its international growth has accelerated dramatically. During the first half of 2026, Geely's overseas sales reportedly increased by more than 150% to nearly 500,000 vehicles, exceeding what it had sold internationally during the entire previous year. 15 years ago, Ford sold Volvo to Geely because Ford needed money. Now Ford is working with Geely because Ford needs electric speed, technology, lower costs, and factory volume. That reversal tells you how dramatically the automotive balance of power has shifted. The West once entered Chinese joint ventures so China could learn how modern cars were designed and manufactured. Now Western manufacturers are increasingly entering partnerships because Chinese companies have technology, platforms, batteries, software, supply chains, and development methods that the Western companies want. And this is where Tesla enters the story. Because Ford's strategy could create a competitive problem Tesla did not have to confront during the first stage of the electric revolution. Tesla benefited enormously when legacy automakers were trying to build Tesla-like electric vehicles using legacy company economics. They carried expensive factories, slower engineering cycles, complex internal organizations, large dealer systems, and massive combustion businesses they could not simply abandon. Tesla could force them into an uncomfortable choice. Either spend billions to chase electric growth and damage profits, or protect profitable gasoline vehicles and risk falling further behind. Ford did exactly what Tesla wanted competitors to do. It poured money into purpose-built electric programs, accepted huge early losses, and tried to build its way into the future. Now Ford is changing the equation. Instead of competing against China and Tesla separately, Ford can combine its own brand recognition, manufacturing footprint, distribution experience, truck and SUV expertise, and European customer base with technology developed inside China's ultra-competitive electric ecosystem. That does not guarantee success, but it could dramatically reduce the cost of staying in the fight. Tesla's problem is that Chinese automakers are already attacking from below on price and from the side on development speed. If traditional Western manufacturers begin borrowing those same advantages through partnerships, Tesla could eventually face competitors that combine Chinese cost structures with Western badges customers already recognize. Picture a future Ford electric crossover using cheaper architecture, faster development methods, and shared components influenced by Geely, but being sold through Ford's existing network with a familiar name on the hood. That product does not need to destroy Tesla. It only needs to become competitive enough that Ford stops losing billions every year. That changes the battlefield. Geely's incentive may be even stronger. Europe has tried to slow the growth of Chinese electric vehicles with additional tariffs on cars imported from China. The logic is straightforward. Chinese manufacturers benefited from a deeply developed domestic supply chain, and levels of state support European officials argued created unfair competitive advantages. Raising import duties makes those cars more expensive when they enter Europe. But tariffs on imports have an obvious weakness. A Chinese-branded vehicle built inside Europe is not imported from China. Build it in Spain with European workers, and the tariff wall becomes far less relevant. Geely therefore gets something immensely valuable from Valencia. It gains established manufacturing capacity inside the European Union without needing to start entirely from scratch. It reduces shipping distances. It limits exposure to changing trade duties. It can stabilize costs. It gains local production experience and potentially a faster route to European customers. It also gets to do all of this alongside a manufacturer it already knows. Other Chinese companies have reached similar conclusions. BYD has been building manufacturing capacity in Hungary. Chinese groups have examined or pursued production opportunities across multiple European countries. Chinese brands already account for a meaningful and rapidly growing share of European new car sales, moving from almost nothing only a few years ago to roughly 7%. Tariffs may slow that expansion, but local production can fundamentally change the equation. Europe tried to build a wall around its automotive industry. Chinese companies are increasingly responding by building factories on the European side of the wall. Ford just offered Geely an unusually efficient entrance. That creates risk for Ford as well. Every technology partnership contains the possibility that the company gaining short-term speed becomes more dependent on capabilities it no longer fully controls. If Ford relies too heavily on outside battery systems, software architectures, electronics, or vehicle platforms, it could weaken the incentive to rebuild those capabilities internally. The cheapest solution this generation can become an expensive dependency in the next. That is why the deal should not be described as either brilliant or disastrous yet. It can be both strategically rational and strategically dangerous. Ford is not collapsing. That distinction matters. Its core gasoline trucks and SUVs remain enormously valuable businesses. Bronco has been successful. Mustang remains one of the most recognizable performance nameplates in the world. Ford's quality results have improved significantly, with the company reaching one of its strongest mainstream brand quality rankings in years. Management has targeted operating profit in the range of $8 to $10 billion for 2026. This is not a bankrupt manufacturer inviting a rescuer into the building. It is a large, profitable company deciding that continuing to burn billions merely to preserve the appearance of independence makes less sense than changing the rules. That may be Ford's real trap for Tesla. Tesla spent a decade proving that the legacy model was too slow. Ford may finally have accepted the lesson completely. Instead of defending the old system, it is dismantling parts of it. Instead of insisting every important technology carry Ford DNA from beginning to end, it is asking which pieces customers actually care about and which pieces can be shared. Instead of treating an underused factory as sacred, it is turning the factory into a platform for multiple brands. Instead of trying to defeat Chinese manufacturers before learning from them, it is bringing one directly into its production system. Tesla wanted Detroit to move faster. Ford may have decided the fastest path is not to become Tesla. It may be to combine what Ford already does well with what China currently does better. And if that formula works, Ford will not be the last company to copy it. Volkswagen has already partnered with Chinese electric vehicle companies including XPeng to access technology and accelerate development. Stellantis has invested in Leap Motor and built a structure for distributing its vehicles internationally. Across the Western auto industry, partnerships that would have seemed unthinkable 15 years ago are becoming normal because the economics of electric vehicles are forcing companies to choose speed over pride. The deeper shift is historical. For decades, Western automakers entered China with the technology, and China provided manufacturing scale and market access. The assumption was that Chinese companies were learning. Today, companies from Europe and America are increasingly studying Chinese platforms because China became the most competitive electric vehicle laboratory on Earth. Ford and Geely's Valencia agreement captures that reversal inside one factory. The company that once sold Geely an automotive brand is now sharing production space with it. The company famous for the moving assembly line is now trying to learn how to compress electric development cycles. The company that built its mythology around independence is deciding interdependence may be the only rational response to a market moving this quickly. For consumers, that could be excellent news. Competition usually gets interesting when companies stop protecting old assumptions. If Geely's technology and cost discipline help Ford build electric vehicles that are cheaper, better equipped, faster to develop, and actually profitable, customers win. Tesla then faces more pressure to improve value rather than relying on the advantage of being early. Chinese manufacturers gain stronger competition from familiar Western brands. Ford preserves jobs and factory utilization in Spain. The downside is that the Western automotive industry may gradually surrender pieces of the technology stack that will define the next 50 years. Batteries, software, power electronics, vehicle operating systems, and advanced manufacturing methods are not side components anymore. They are becoming the engine expertise of the electric age. Borrow them for too long, and a company risks becoming little more than the badge, design studio, assembly footprint, and distribution network sitting on top of someone else's technology. That is the gamble Ford is making. It may be the smartest way to escape the electric losses that have punished the company for years. It may also accelerate the rise of the same Chinese manufacturers Ford will have to compete against everywhere else. And that is why calling this simply a Ford-Geely factory deal misses the point. This is a test of what comes after the first phase of the electric revolution. Tesla won the first phase by proving legacy automakers had become too slow and complacent. Chinese companies won the next phase by proving electric cars could be developed faster and sold cheaper than much of the West believed possible. Ford is now trying to create the third phase, where a legacy manufacturer stops fighting those lessons and starts combining them. If it succeeds, Tesla may discover that the most dangerous Ford is not the Ford trying to imitate Tesla. It is the Ford willing to borrow Chinese speed, spread development costs, fill idle factories, preserve its strongest brands, and attack electric pricing without destroying the profits that keep the rest of the company alive. If it fails, Ford could spend the next decade discovering that every shortcut made Geely stronger while making Ford more dependent. Either way, something fundamental has changed. The question is no longer whether Chinese electric technology can compete with Detroit. Detroit has already answered that by inviting it inside. The question now is whether Ford has found the partnership model that finally closes the gap with Tesla, or whether it has opened a door that eventually becomes impossible to close. And if you had to choose today, which side would you rather be on? Tesla defending the electric empire it built, or Ford quietly combining a century of brand power with the very Chinese technology that disrupted it?